The air inside Blackwood Asylum was thick, heavy with the dust of decades of neglect and the silence of countless untold stories. To Leo, Maya, Chloe, and Ben, it was a symphony. They were urban explorers, hunters of the ghosts of the past, and Blackwood was their holy grail. Shut down in 1972 after a patient abuse scandal, the place was a wound on the landscape, a skeleton of brick and glass that nature was slowly trying to reclaim. Leo, the group's leader, gestured with his flashlight. Maya, stay on camera. Ben, stick with me. Chloe, let us know if you find anything interesting in the records. Chloe, the group's historian, nodded, her eyes already scanning the moldering remains of the reception desk. They say Dr. Alastair Finch was more monster than a physician, she said quietly. His methods were experimental. They moved deeper, the sound of their footsteps echoing like heartbeats in the empty halls. The patient cells were grim concrete boxes, the scratches on the walls telling tales of despair. But it was the morgue that drew them, the epicenter of Blackwood's darkest legends. It was cold inside, a chill that seemed to cling to the bone. As Maya filmed the rusted mal slabs, Ben's flashlight danced across a section of the wall that looked wrong. "Leo, come check this out," he whispered. The plaster wall was hollow. A firm push revealed not brick, but blackness. Behind the false wall was a narrow, dustless corridor. The air that wafted out was sterile, with the faint chemical scent of preservation. Unlike the rest of the asylum, this place had been sealed. The corridor opened into a wing that wasn't on any blueprint. It was a records wing, impeccably preserved. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls from floor to ceiling. In the center sat a single metal desk with a chair. "This is impossible," Chloe murmured, running her fingers across one of the cabinets. "It's clean." Leo pulled open a drawer. It was filled with patient folders, each bearing a name and a number. He picked one out at random. Patient 73, Experiment, Temporal Perception Modulation. He opened the file. Inside were detailed notes of a man being subjected to sensory deprivation and hallucinogenic drugs, forced to live an entire year inside his own mind over the course of a single hour. Dr. Finch's notes were cold, clinical. Subject can no longer distinguish between memory and reality. Success. Sickened, they opened more files. Each one was a nightmare. Memory extraction, where a patient's childhood memories were systematically replaced with fabricated trauma. Phobia induction, where a patient was conditioned into a paralyzing fear of his own reflection. "This is why they shut this place down," Maya said, her voice trembling as she lowered her camera. This wasn't treatment, this was torture. Chloe, however, was focused on an odd detail. "The dates," she said. "They stop in 1972 for all the patients, except for this one cabinet." She pointed to a single cabinet in the far corner, marked simply Protocol 0. Inside was only one file, thicker than the others. The name on the file read Patient 0. Leo placed the file on the desk, and the four of them gathered around. The first few pages were similar to the others, detailing experiments to create the perfect patient, one whose mind could be completely rewritten. But then the notes changed. Finch wrote of a breakthrough. He was no longer just manipulating minds. He believed he'd found a way to make the asylum itself participate. "The building remembers," one entry read. "The walls hold the echoes of pain. By amplifying this energy, the environment itself becomes the catalyst. The asylum no longer needs doctors. It heals itself. It finds new patients on its own." The notes grew more and more delusional, the dates skipping erratically. The final dated page from 1972 read, "The cycle is complete. I have left Protocol 0 active. Blackwood will find a way. It always does." A chill ran through the group. They flipped through the rest of the pages. They were blank, all except for the very last one. At the top of the final page, in crisp handwriting that was not Finch's, was a single entry. The ink was fresh, so fresh they could smell it. The entry was short, just one sentence. But it was the date written next to it that made everyone's blood run cold. The date was today. The entry read, "New subjects arrived at 2347, 4 of them. Observation begins." Panic erupted. "We have to get out of here, now," Leo yelled. They scrambled back through the corridor, bursting into the morgue. But the opening in the plaster wall was no longer there. It was a solid concrete wall, covered in the same decades-old grime and soot as the rest of the room. Ben hammered his fist against it, the dull thud echoing in the silence. "No, no, no!" Chloe was hyperventilating, her historical knowledge useless against the impossible architecture. Maya raised her camera with trembling hands, filming the solid wall where a doorway had been moments before. "We're not alone in here," she whispered. A soft, metallic click echoed from the hidden wing behind them. They turned slowly. The corridor door, which they had left open, was now shut, and on the metal desk in the center of the records room, which had been empty save for the Patient Zero file, now sat 4 new folders. They hadn't been there before. Hesitantly, moving as if through water, they approached the sealed passageway and peered through its small wire-reinforced glass window. They could just make out the names on the tabs of the new folders, written in that same fresh, crisp script. Leo, Maya, Chloe, Ben. They weren't explorers discovering Blackwood's history. They were the next chapter. The beam from Leo's flashlight flickered and died, plunging them into the oppressive darkness of the asylum. But they weren't alone. From the blackness came the soft sound of a pen scratching on paper, as a new entry was being recorded. This story was a presentation from Shadow Tales.